On day 27, we'll be exploring around Salem, Massachusetts. We'll be filling in this part of our trip. We'll leave our hotel in Boston and drive to Salem. There in Salem, we'll look at the Witch Trials Memorial, the Bewitched Statue, the Witch House, drive over to the House of the Seven Gables and tour it, see the Witch Museum, and then head to our hotel for the night. As we head towards Salem, let us talk about the witch trials a little bit. In February 1692, the Reverend Samuel Parris, pastor of the city, his daughter Betty Parris, and her niece Abigail Williams started having fits of throwing things and screaming and hollering. It was finally determined that they had been cursed by witches. 3 women were arrested and tried, but eventually that led to over 200 men and women being charged, 160 of them brought to trial, and 20 of them killed by hanging or pressing. 6 more died in prison without ever having been convicted. After a few hours drive, we're heading into Salem to start looking at the various sites there. A court with 2 judges, Jonathan Corwin and John Hawthorne, were convened on June 2nd, 1692. Bridget Bishop was the first one hung on June 10th, 1692, and over the next 103 days till September 22nd, 1692, others were hung. Our first stop will be the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. This was built next to a cemetery to remember those who died. It's located here at the Red and is a memorial to the 20 who died during this time in history. Each one of the little benches that stick out from the wall has a name on it. On June 10th, 1 was hung for witchcraft. On July 19th, 5 more were hung for witchcraft. On August the 19th, 5 more were hung for witchcraft. Then Giles Corey was pressed to death on September the 19th because he refused to confess. The last group of hangings was on September the 22nd, and 8 people were hung that day. After these, some sanity came to the court, and they stopped it altogether. To this stuff and see. I'm assuming a lot of these things will tell us. Alright, now we're going to go and do a drive-by of the Witch Statue.
Take the next left onto Charter Street.
This Essex Street must be. Although it looks like a alley. I've got to stop. There's police coming from somewhere, so I'm going to stop a long time, I think. Next, we're going to look at the Bewitched Statue. Where they're coming from.
I don't know who they come.
So I'm trying to stop and wait on them. Okay, so.
The Witch House at Salem may not be open yet when you arrive. Head east on 6th Street toward Washington Street, then turn left onto
October residence parking lot. Next, we're going to look at what is called the Witch House. This is the only house in town left standing that has any connection with the witch trials. It was built in 1642 by Judge Jonathan Corwin, who was one of the judges at the witch trial. So let's go look at this house. We're not going to be able to take pictures inside, so I'm going to show you some from their website. After looking at the house, it's time to go eat. We ate at the Gula Gula Cafe, and it was kind of an interesting place. We ate outside, and they had various types of food. Then it's time to head over to the House of the Seven Gables, where we have a tour scheduled. This is a real house that really existed and had a fictional story told about it. It is a complex of buildings, most of which are just moved here because of their historical significance, but have nothing to do with the House of Seven Gables. Visitor Center, Museum Shop, Nathaniel Hawthorne birthplace, and the Hooper Hathaway House. First, we'll be going through the Visitor Center and picking up our tickets. After getting our tickets, we'll look around in the garden a little bit and then head over to the Nathaniel Hawthorne birthplace. This house was built in 1750, and this is where Nathaniel Hawthorne was born when it was in its original location. It was later cut in half and moved here in 1958. Let's look around. First, on the first floor. And now we head upstairs to the second floor and look at the bedrooms up there. This is a picture of Hawthorne's wife, Sophia Amelia Peabody. We talked about her when we talked about the manse. And here's a picture of Nathaniel Hawthorne as an older man. And these are their children, Uma, Julian, and Rose. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in this room on July the 4th, 1804. Now we move over to the other bedroom. This one is decorated around 1800. And if you'll notice on the bed, there are two pieces of equipment. These are used for tightening the cords underneath the bed to make it not sag. It's tightened every day. Sleep tight is a term that comes from this. Bathroom. And now we head back down and look at the kitchen a little bit before heading out to look at the harbor. The Hooper Hathaway house is not open for touring, so we just have to look at a few pictures off the internet. Now it's time for our tour of the House of the Seven Gables. This seaside mansion was associated with Nathaniel Hawthorne's classic novel, and it's been a museum since 1910. Our guide will be Christian.
When this house, in its heyday, 1680, there's 7 gables on it, there's 14 rooms. In the winter months, it would take between 30 and 40 cords of wood to completely heat it. This hearth would be going 24 hours a day. You would not want to start a new fire every time you were going to cook a meal. That would be way too tedious. Meals would be fairly simple, some kind of chowder or stew, maybe some root vegetables, maybe some potatoes just thrown on the hearth to bake. These are the original bricks from the chimney in 1668. So why is there a little shop in there? Because when Caroline Emerton bought this house in 1908, she expected that people would be coming here because of Nathaniel Hawthorne's book. And they would expect to see Hepzibah's Scent Shop, which is described in the beginning of that book. So you would come in off Turner Street, which in the book is called Pinchin Street, and you would come in here, pay your money, and go through. It wouldn't be odd for people in Salem to have a penny shop. The Turners would not. They had plenty of money. But if you were the wife, mother, relative, dependent upon a sailor's money for your income, and that sailor was gone between 6 months and a year with nothing coming in, you would have to find a way to make some money. How would you do it today? eBay, Etsy, something like that. No different. It's still part of the economy. So this would be a little shop. You might sell gingerbread out of it. You might sell cookies. You might sell some consignment or sewing items also. All right, so the Turners would definitely entertain people in their homes, sea captains or other business people from the town. Everyone would know the Turner House. It was one of the biggest houses in the city from the time it was built. And it was referred to as a mansion. The style is post-medieval Gothic. I think that's a great description. So, you've come here for dinner, and you're not going to eat in the kitchen, are you, with the family? Where are you going to eat? Dining room. But look at the difference in this room. What's the first thing that you see? What's different?
Brighter.
Right, it's brighter. John Turner II doubled the size of the windows in the house when he took it over, second generation. He also covers over the exposed beams in the house with this beautiful Georgian paneling. And it's a paint that has copper oxide in it, so in the light it turns a bright green, much like the Statue of Liberty. That's the easiest thing to compare it to. So he does a great job at this. John Turner II is Massachusetts' first millionaire. So he worked hard, following in his father's footsteps, and so you have this room. You are actually forcing a Georgian-style room into a post-medieval mansion, which is difficult to do. You have a copy of French wallpaper that was done here by hand. When we get upstairs, you'll see a room that John Turner II created as a Georgian style. You'll see some of the differences. But his son, John Turner III, not so much the businessman. In fact, this house was sold at auction in 1782. In 1783, Samuel Ingersoll, a ship's captain and businessman in the maritime business in Salem, buys this house. The biggest difference between 1783 and 1680 is that without moving off its foundation, this house is in a new country. This is the United States of America. Ingersoll's an American captain. It is the great age of sail. The ships are sleeker, they're faster. They can go all over the world. His ships go to Canton on the left and Macau on the right. Samuel Ingersoll pretty much stays in the Atlantic to be closer to his business, but his ships travel the world. They bring back wonderful things like the porcelain on the table and the tea set and the Persian rug and this wonderful chest of drawers over here. We're enamored with the China and Japanese trade, so much so that this chest is actually made in Germany. So what does that mean? Well, by 1811, there's only one surviving Ingersoll left in Salem. That's her picture right there. That is Susanna. That is his eldest daughter. So she does something that no one figures she will do. She continues to run the family business by herself. She becomes one of the most successful people ever in Salem, and is the single longest resident of this house, living here more than 50 years. She never married. She turned down a number of proposals. And why do you think that would be?
The money would have gone to her husband.
Nothing would have gone to her husband, that's right.
Still today.
Well,
Women were not allowed to have property.
anyway, that's absolutely true. So the fact that she ran this and kept that legacy up, that's enough reason. There's enough good stories about Susanna. But she is also Nathaniel Hawthorne's second cousin. So when Nathaniel Hawthorne comes to work in Salem at the Custom House right down the street, he's a surveyor and an agent for customs, she invites him to the house. He comes over here and she regales him with stories of what it was like to be brought up a child in this house. Hawthorne then says, well, wait a minute, you're describing something with Seven Gables. She talks about running all over the house, and he's only seeing 3. But she was so descriptive and so fanciful in what she told him that in his imagination he created that scene once again, just like it was in 1680. So she, above all else, inspired him to write this book. And he did. There's another character in the book. I mentioned Hepzibah Pynchon in the kitchen in the sun shop. Now we come in here, and there's a gentleman called Uncle Clifford. Uncle Clifford has spent time in prison for a crime he did not commit, so he skulks around the house and wanders mysteriously through rooms. He lives in the attic, and no one can figure out how he gets in and out. So Caroline comes up with an idea, and this is not in the book, it's not in the design of the house, but she wants something fun and memorable on the tour. So she creates a method whereby Uncle Clifford might get to the attic without being seen.
That is so cool.
So there's a little staircase, and this is how we'll go to the attic today.
The second story is used for a bed and breakfast.
So the first section of the house that was built is right back here. This is the oldest section. Is this A-frame? Has nothing to do with the Scarlet Letter, please. And it's an A-frame with the big wooden beams and pine planking. It's not a reach to say that some of the wood might have come off the ship, off the dock. If a ship was decommissioned or it had been in a wreck, it would be sold up. That you never wasted anything. These are the original floorboards in the house. They would never be 2 feet wide. If they were 2 feet wide or bigger, even that tree would be shipped back to England. It was the king's lumber. So you see some of the tools and so on. You see an attempt at insulation over here. It's brick and plaster and strapping and horsehair plaster. That's called nogging. And it was something that was brought over from England. It was used in some country houses over here. But it really doesn't work well with the sea atmosphere. It dissolves a lot. 1668, and they build the original house. We're back here.
Thank you.
The window behind me is the one back here. Chimney is right there. This is the first house, 1668, 2 rooms down, 2 rooms up, and a little dormer on the other side. Very quickly, John Turner knows he's bringing stuff back from the islands. He wants a separate room for a breakfast room. He wants to turn part of the kitchen into a dining room. It would have been on the other side. This is where we came in to start the tour, where Hepzibah's shop is. So his family expands a little bit more, so he adds on a storage space on the other side and another bedroom. John Turner II has 6 kids, so he's looking for a place to hide. So he puts on some more space. John Turner III had 8 children, so there could have been 24 people in this house at once. We'll explain that a little bit more later. So Ingersoll buys the house. He wants to square it up. He wants it to look like the other sea captain's houses, or the closest he can get. Takes off these 3 gables. That is Ingersoll's house, right there. So when Nathaniel Hawthorne visits in the 1840s, when he's visiting Susanna, that's what he sees. So between the years of about 1795 and 1910, that was the house of the Seven Gables. People were very confused. I mentioned there were 5 indentured servants in the house under the Turners, and there were 5 people that were enslaved here under John Turner II. This could have been part of your sleeping space, especially in the warmer months. Maybe under the eaves, maybe one of these cubby spaces, you would have a bedroll. And this could be your life for the time that you worked or lived in this house. Someone would have been in the kitchen, especially during the winter months, to keep all that fire going. and one person would be out in the corridors or hallways during the night in case any of the children needed tending to. This would be the one room, if you were a child, that you were probably told that, well, you really shouldn't be in here. Imagine you have John Turner, this is an important room. The wallpaper, the original design dates back to 1790, and this is a copy of it. It would have been, as we say in Massachusetts, wicked expensive. And it is a Diana pattern, it's a neoclassical. And it's not only, the restoration isn't only amazing because it was perfectly reproduced, but imagine hanging the wallpaper if you look at how much settling has been done. So this was an amazing job for both. So around this table with a dab of wax, a drop of ink, and a gram of whiskey, all the deals would get done. There's a wonderful secretary's desk, about 1820, of Susanna Ingersoll. And this one would span between John Turner III and the captain who owned the house. But this room was extremely important in House of the Seven Gables. House of the Seven Gables, part of it is an apology or an attempt at redemption for Hawthorne, for his great-great-great-grandfather, who was Judge Hawthorne of the Salem Witch Trials. Judge Hawthorne, during the trials, was the only one that never recanted for his actions. He never said what he did was wrong. So Hawthorne was trying to make up for that in a lot of ways. So he creates this character, Colonel Pynchon, in the beginning. He's this quintessential greedy rich guy that's kind of mean, and he wants this piece of property that Matthew Mall owns. Matthew Mall owns this land. Pynchon wants it because he wants it, because it isn't his. So he has enough political clout and money in 1692 Salem that he has Matthew Mall accused, tried, and convicted of witchcraft and sent to the gallows. From the gallows, Matthew Mall curses the entire Pynchon family for posterity, saying, "God will give you blood to drink." Kind of ominous, but Pynchon pays no attention. In fact, he builds this house, this monstrosity, House of the Seven Gables, on top of Matthew Mall's grave. Hawthorne calls it unquiet ground. You think? So, the day comes when Pynchon's going to have an open house, show off his wealth of this house. No one can find him, the door's locked. His servants come running through, and in this room, as described by Nathaniel Hawthorne, the colonel is found slumped over in a chair, dead with blood running down his beard. So the curse has worked. Well, the book fast forwards to the mid-1800s when this curse has traveled through all generations. There's one ghost in the book. Her name is Alice, so she sort of travels between all those generations, and she's trapped in the house until something comes to fruition. So, Hepzibah Pynchon is living here. I mentioned her with Uncle Clifford, the very odd guy. So she invites her cousin Phoebe to come here from the countryside. Phoebe is the one source of goodness, hope, and light in the book. Everyone loves her, especially a young boarder to the house by the name of Holgrave. Holgrave is the daguerreotypist or a photographer of his day, and he's here under the guise of writing a book about old Salem residents. In reality, Holgrave is a direct descendant of Matthew Mall, who's buried under the house, and he is seeking, like, what are these Pynchons all about? So a lover's tryst develops between Phoebe and Holgrave. Well, the question of the book, will the lover's tryst between Holgrave and Phoebe dispel the curse? So this is really where preservation begins, is in rooms like this. We know that in some of the rooms there were 17 layers of paint. There was also a lot of settling. You can tell by how the Ingersolls made their money in that great age of sale. The blue cone is
Sugar.
sugar. The tongs are made to take all the calories out of it. The porcelain is here, the silk, and what is in the block? Somebody said chocolate the other day. When I said,
Tea.
I said, with the guides we have around here, that would have been about a long time ago. With chocolate. It is. So in any era, this bedroom is pretty nice.
Yeah.
This is the big difference when you see the Georgian style of the dining room downstairs. It's Georgian style, but the ceilings are low because, like I said, he's forcing the Georgian style into a post-medieval structure. Now, John Turner II can create anything he wants, so he creates this. Highest ceiling in the house is in what we refer to as the Great Chamber. This is a copy of the bed of John Turner II. It was his most expensive item outside of his ships. That and the tapestries on it, which were both made in England. The bed was worth 42 pounds. That is about the yearly salary of a dock worker in Salem of the day. So, he had a probate inventory when he died, John Turner II, of 15 pages. Most people had about a page and a half. So why do we not see many more things belonging to the Turners in the house? Well, look above the fireplace. There's the person responsible. That is John Turner III. He was a man that sort of was the transition between the British subjects and the new country of America, and he never quite fit in. He was a loyalist to King George. It was really his politics that were his undoing. He wasn't a great businessman, but in a period of probably 20 years or so, he lost the equivalent of $20 million. He lost the family fortune. He was very stubborn and loyal to the king. He could have gone back to England at any time. They had plenty of money and ships and everything. But when he started supporting things like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act and the Intolerable Acts, as they're referred to now, no one would empty his ships, no one would sail with him. 7 of his children and his second wife disowned him because they knew if they didn't, they would never be able to do business either. When he died, his probate inventory was half a page and he was worth maybe £5. The most successful members of the family is right here. That's Mary. That's his 4th child. Her mother died in childbirth. He married again and had married again 2 years later and had 4 more kids. She married a very successful business guy in Boston and lived in an area referred to now as Beacon Hill. So this is the entertainment room.
Oh, this is gorgeous.
So this is where Nathaniel Hawthorne, who's pictured above the pianoforte over here. This is where he would come and have the discussions with Susanna Ingersoll. She would describe the house to him and things like that. Hawthorne was an interesting character. He was very well politically connected in Massachusetts, and that's how he got the job at the Custom House. He was well qualified for it. But then the political tide changed by the end of the 1840s, and he has to move on. But during the era he was here, this is where he would visit. So, this is not something you would see in every house. You might see a cabinet or something, but this is just a beautiful add-on. Originally it was the Persian blue and gold. You would serve from the top down. You would serve the aperitif, the wine, the cordial, and when the party really got going, you would have the shipyard pumpkinhead and the Sam Oktoberfest and the port wine at the bottom. It wouldn't be hard for the Turners or the Ingersoll to get the ale rum. You would come in here off Turner Street. In the book, it's Pinchin Street. This is in the first pages of the book. The Pinchin elm is mentioned, which did stand right here, but it fell to the elm light of the last century. So you would turn the corner, you'd come in here, and the first 2 things you see are these huge windows, and the next thing is you see a door with 500 nails. This is John Turner II sort of flexing to show that he's got a lot of money. This is the level of his own. This is your flashy website today. This is saying if you want to do business with us, this is the level that we are on. It's built like a ship's bulkhead because we say around here some of the storms in the winter get wicked bad. So you can get sea spray off the harbor, especially full moon, high tide in December. You don't get a tremendous amount of snow in this area of Massachusetts, but you get a lot of wind in the winter months, and it's not odd to have 30 or 40 mile an hour winds at 10 degrees. So you needed to protect the house. So if you look back at the house, this was someone's home. 3 different families made this home, and each one of them put their mark upon it. The Turners building it here, taking a chance, moving out of Boston and starting their own small maritime empire. That continues through 3 generations, selling to the Ingersolls, who travel through the great age of sail with this house, and then on into the 20th century with the Upton family and the arts. And then a great philanthropist like Caroline Hamilton comes in here with the creativity and the desire to turn this house back to its former glory, and as it would be seen in the book.
Now it's time to head to the Salem Witch Museum.
Take the next right.
The museum is located on the village green, and so we're going to park across the green and walk across it to get to the museum. The museum looks like it's an old church, and probably was, that's been repurposed. It is designed to tell the story of what happened in 1692 here. And we'll be taking a tour, but you can't photograph inside, so we just got to watch the show. Out in front is a statue of Roger Conan, who was the founder of Salem. And now it's time to head to our hotel for the night. It has gotten pretty late in the evening, and so the sun is setting as we head toward our hotel. It'll be a fairly long drive to get there. We'll be staying in the Comfort Inn in Woburn, Massachusetts, and this brings us to the end of day 27.